Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to How to Make a Scene, our series on Lumpen Radio and co-prosperity. I'm Brandon Alvandia, thrilled to continue this journey exploring the artist-run cultural ecosystems of the 80s, 90s, and today in Chicago, with this history of alternative gallery spaces, independent publications, and socially engaged collectives. Our discussions have been led by moderators who engage with artists who have built experimental infrastructures of support for themselves and their peers. These gatherings are platforms for sharing generational knowledge, informal oral histories, and strategizing for future impact. How to Make a Scene is a collaborative effort between Public Media Institute, the parent nonprofit of Lumpen Radio and Co-Prosperity, and Midway, coalition of Midwestern artists organizations. The series is supported by Terra Foundation for American Art as part of the citywide Art Design Chicago initiative. Our aim is to connect veteran artist organizers with those working today through intimate events at Co-Prosperity here, broadcast on Lumpen Radio, thanks for listening, and live streams on LumpenTV. Today's final in-person panel of the series has been curated by and will be moderated by artist Ben Foch of New Capital in conversation with Iain Muirhead, NFA SPACE, and Taylor Payton, Grunts Rare Books / Sulk Chicago. Ben is a longtime friend and collaborator of mine, showing in spaces and projects such as Art Ledge, Ben Russell, The Great Good Place at Three Walls, among others that included Ben's work. Always a highlight of each show. We're grateful he's able to bring his talents here to us at Co-Prosperity with his peers, Iain and Taylor. So intro Ben Foch. Ben Foch, born 1977, is an artist living and working in Chicago, Illinois. Recent solo exhibitions include Proof of Work, 2024, Hood Ornament, 2021 at M. LeBlanc, Chicago, Illinois, and inclusion in the group exhibition Tricky Passage, 2022, curated by Ben Gill, at Rona Hoffman Gallery, Chicago, Illinois. In March 2022, he launched Cult of Cheetah NFT project, which I can show people in the studio here. I have it on my phone. He co-founded and directed New Capital, legendary space, 2010 to 2017, artist-run exhibition space in Chicago's East Garfield Park neighborhood. Let's give it a nice round of applause to Ben for moderating today.
Thank you, Brandon. Really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to have two guests. On my right, Iain Muirhead, who ran NFA SPACE, and on my left, Taylor Payton, formerly of Sulk, and now of Grunts Rare Books. And I think we're just going to get started. Maybe we'll start, if you could introduce the dates and the times that you ran NFA SPACE.
Sure.
And then you could talk. But yeah.
Do you want me to talk about NFA SPACE in any detail yet, or do you want to just know the dates?
Let's just start with the dates,
Yeah.
just so people can get a sense.
Sure. NFA SPACE is an artist-run space from 1996. I think the first show was in October of 1996, and our last show was in February of 2002, so 1996 to 2002.
Okay. And you started Sulk. Let's first talk a little bit about Sulk, and then we can talk about Grunts.
So I ran an apartment gallery called Sulk Chicago for 3 years, and it started in September 2021 and finished in 2024. Called Sulk Chicago. Since then, I've started a new venture because I moved apartments, but we won't talk about that yet.
Okay. So I guess, and I'm just going to pose the question to both of you. What motivated you, and what were some of the reasons to start an exhibition space? And how old were you when you started?
Well, so if I just back up a tiny bit, 2 years prior to starting the space, I was still a student at the School of the Art Institute.
Right.
And I helped found a program there called SUGS that is now called SITE. It's 30 years old this year. And it was a student-run 4 gallery spaces at the time for student work with a student committee. Everybody's making the decisions. Everyone involved is a student except there's one faculty advisor, Michael X. Ryan. And so in 2 years, I was the director of that space, installing, doing publicity, along with a committee and co-founders Amavong Panya. We ended up doing a lot of the work. It was over 30 shows in a 2-year period across 4 spaces on the SAIC campus.
That's wild.
It was a lot. And so we felt super confident in sort of the physical kind of aspect of running spaces, but also very constrained by the committee process of like having everybody decide on shows and managing shows. So we were super excited coming out of SAIC and having already forged sort of a working relationship to start a space together. So we started NFA SPACE within a couple months of graduating from SAIC in the undergraduate program. So, you know, at the time, one of the aspects of that program was learning about and visiting the current alternative spaces or the spaces that were still surviving. And there was a wave of sort of spaces called the uncomfortable spaces, and there was two very big nonprofits, Randolph Street Gallery and Name, and they were sort of wrapping things up. So like there was clearly this sense of this generation that was sort of wrapping up, and like there weren't going to be a lot of opportunities for young artists coming out of school at that moment. So we're like, let's jump in.
So you actually had crossover with Randolph Street and Name?
Yeah, we had a
wow,
little bit of
that's
crossover
amazing.
with both. And with Beret, I remember visiting shows at Beret and 10 and 1 and MWM, and forgot what the fourth one was. I think there was 4.
Maybe Chicago Project Room, or no?
They were starting their own thing at that time. They weren't part of the Uncomfortable Spaces, but that was a peer group of sort of projects. So, yeah, I mean, our sense was that we didn't know how we were going to fit into, like, as working artists and also wanting to show work and kind of seeing all that happen. We, like, looked at River North, which was the main gallery district, and you know, West Loop was just an idea at that point. You know, I think Gallery 312 was over there, and Donald Young was starting to kind of move over there. And we were just like, we got to do our own thing. We're just not interested in any of that. There's not going to be opportunities for us. They're not interested in what we're doing. You know, let's just, you know, we're aware of this history of sort of artist DIY in Chicago. Let's jump in and be a part of that.
You felt that there was a generational shift.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you also started when you were a student, right? That's amazing.
I had a question for Ian. So the Uncomfortable Spaces, is that a name given to a group of galleries, or how did that come to be? I've never heard of this.
I don't know if they came up with the name themselves. Maybe, Ben, you do. But that's how we all referred to them. They were the Uncomfortable Spaces.
I remember seeing it branded that way.
Yeah. And I think at some point they referred to themselves that way, but I don't know how the name came about. It's a good question.
Was NFA an Uncomfortable Space?
No,
or was
no,
this
we were the
next
generation
gen?
after, yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
I guess when I started, I didn't know that much about anything, but I did know that there was a history of exhibition spaces and apartments and off spaces, and a big artist run pull, obviously. I was in college, I was 20, and I was transferring to SAIC, and I really didn't know anyone. So for me, I think, like, looking back subconsciously, it was kind of a way just to make community. But now that there's been a little bit of distance, I agree that there was kind of a gap. There weren't many spaces of my age group that were popping up, and since I've started my space, there have been a few. But yeah, I think that I didn't know that there was a need for, like you were saying, these other galleries in Chicago that exist maybe aren't interested in the work that my peers are showing, but we're all super into each other's work. So starting a space was a really good thing, even though I didn't really know that many artists or who I was going to show until it was happening. And then now it's something I'm proud of. Yeah.
I feel like when I became aware of your space, I felt like there was a little bit of a generational lull in terms of artist-run spaces, or just of DIY project spaces. And I think that was one of the things that drew me to your space, because I'm always hungry for that kind of energy, and I think Chicago is not totally unique, but pretty unique in terms of larger cities and a DIY community.
Totally. I mean, I wouldn't have had the square footage in New York, for example, to have an apartment gallery. So I think Chicago is an apt city for it when I started in 2021. And as I learned from starting the space has always been, and probably will continue to be.
Mm-hmm. What was some of your experiences with your first show? How was like the first show that you put on? Just tell me about that a little bit. I think first shows are fun.
I made a show with my friend Jake Fagundo. He was really the only artist I knew at the time that I knew had enough work and like big paintings to fill this living room that I had left empty for his show when I moved in. And then from there, we did like a big painting show, and then the next show at the gallery, Jake and I co-curated, and it was a show called Nice Work, and it was like a 25-person group show, and that was really like felt like the first show because it was the first time there were so many different people involved in the space, like in the show, coming to the show, and so that was really nice, and that stuck as like an annual. So we had Nice Work 1, 2, and then Nice Work 3, which was called Nice Work Forever, and Jake Fagundo was the co-curator of all of those, but we always would have a new group, and we would never repeat from anything like that had already been in the program that year. So it was always a way to bring new people in and kind of just remind like the audience of the mission, I guess, which is like a big open space for art.
Yeah.
Same question.
Our first show so we had 3 different locations during that 5.5 years. The first spot was in the old Berghoff building at 202 South State downtown. Mm-hmm. So it was State and Adams. So it was only a couple blocks from the Art Institute. And we came across the space on a referral from a faculty member that we ran into in the elevator at SAIC doing something. And we went over, and Juanita Guerrero, I think, was the manager at the time, and she was showing us all the available spaces. And so there's the Berghoff restaurant, which was this brewery on the bottom, but the rest of the building was all empty offices from like the 20s of like law offices and things with poured glass windows and, you know, with metal balconies and gorgeous studios. So we took a studio in the building, shared it, 3 of us. But she showed us the 5th floor that used to be an old beauty salon, and it was in kind of rough shape, and it was emptied out. And so immediately we asked, you know, if we fix up that space, can we do a couple of exhibits in there? So we traded fixing up a space about this size, maybe a little bit bigger, for using it for 2.5 months. It was a crazy deal, like, I guess for both of us at the time, but I look back, I'm like, 3.5 months, like we should have at least asked for like a year, because it was a lot of work, you know, just getting things ready.
Sure.
And so yeah, we did 2 shows in that space, but what was really cool about it is it was, you know, divvied up into all these rooms, so we could encourage, you know, artists to come in and do sort of site-specific things or do sort of dynamic kind of layout. So first show was like a very swaggery painting show called Cockfight, and it was like, yeah, it's fun to look back at these things. And then the second show was this show called Sacred Profane, and so we ran each show for 4 weeks. The openings were the most attended, you know, like everybody came out for the opening, and then it was just by appointment, and there was no appointments. So there were lessons to take away from that, but we can get into that later. Yeah.
I'm also a little bit curious to just to hear about audience from both of you. Did who you think would show up, and who showed up that you didn't expect?
That's a great question. So you know, we had the history with the SUGS program, and so folks from SAIC were interested in what we were doing. Mm-hmm. So we would have like, you know, admin people, some former students, the friends of the 5 or 6 people that were in the show, you know. But I had started teaching for Gallery 37 pretty immediately after school. And so some of my students from down in Southside came to the show with like some of the people from that school, which was really interesting. High school kids from, you know, just north of Hyde Park coming over to the Loop to see, you know, their teacher show. And but the surprising thing was reconnecting with William Cordova, who we ended up working with later. William had just gone to Miami and then come back. We had been in school together, and William was a really great hustler and like promoter, but also collaborator and opportunity maker. And so he handed me this book he made already of his work, and I'm like, how did you do this? Right. He's like, we'll talk, you know. He's like, and so that was like the seed from that first show of like, because he liked what we were doing, and you know, we sort of found a kindred energy to like make things happen, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the people that showed up to your show, was it people that you expected to show up?
Yeah. I think also because of my proximity to SAC, I was at Dearborn and Harrison, so people would walk over, and I'd always do Friday openings. So I got a lot of like staff and faculty coming through, but also a lot of students. And then as I like aged out and graduated, it stayed really young because of where I was in the city. But yeah, I think it's always fun when people's parents and family would come to the shows. That was super sweet to see.
That's great.
Like when I had Liza show, Liza Joe Eilers, her, like, she brought a whole band of people with her. Yeah, I think it was always really nice when professors would come.
Yeah. I guess one question I also have too is just about maybe more broader conceptual reasons for opening a space. Like, I know you talked about community, which is a very positive thing. I'm wondering a little bit if there were commercial intentions on your part, like if you ever had ambitions to be like a commercial dealer, or if it was always...
I'll start. That was always a dilemma for us, and it became like that's the structure that we would use. On one hand, so neither Amavong nor I were from money. We didn't have any money to start the gallery. I mean, we were taking loans out just to be in school. Everything that we were going to do, we were going to have to pay for ourselves. So we, and having both just been an institutional space with SUGS, we had a budget, we were able to do shows, they were all very museum kind of project space driven. So it wasn't about like making objects or things that people could take away in a sales capacity. But we didn't really structure or study or even think about until we were in the situation of like, well, how do we keep this thing going other than just like working our asses off outside, you know, to come up with the expense of it. So we tried a lot of different things. Like we tried, and like dumb things, like you look back and like, that wasn't a good idea. But like, you know, like artist show fees, you know, like, cause you look at it at the time, like it was a $100 artist show fee we did for a few shows. And like, you're like, oh my God, artist show. You're asking people to pay to show their work. Like that's what you look at it now and you're like, that's not cool. But like at the time we're like, look, after like a couple shows, you have to design and print, we felt like a good quality card, right? There's $400 at the time, at least. You know, in the quantity of 1,000 or 2,000, so you can get them mailed out. Then there's your postage. You know, you got 20 cents per, you know, that you're sending out, trying to build a mailing list. And then there's whatever sort of, obviously the beer for the show, we got to get that. And maybe some food, beer primarily. At least beer. Then food, you know, and then like the rent, utilities, you know, like these things, a certain amount of it, like we're covering 80% of it, but we got to get over the last amount. Like, how are we going to do that at the beginning? So we did our show fees, but then we started, like, we did list of works for sale, you know, like, and then over time, obviously, we got some pushback on the show fee and realized that's not a good idea. But we also started, you know, selling work. Like people would want things, and it wasn't a high dollar amount in hindsight, but it was enough to kind of get us through the rent and get us through, you know, the cards and so forth. Maybe some ads at some like little publications like New Art Examiner, which is how I met Ben Gill, or the Cakewalk, or like 10 by 10, like these little you need to do the ads because, you know, like, and I say this like with exasperation now, almost, because like that's the easiest part now and the cheapest, because
Yeah.
you can email your mailing list, you can design and just spread it right out, you know, through the email or Instagram or the website. But like the really big expense
This
parts.
is pre-social media.
Yeah, it was like, and then a lot of it was like trying to reach out for press, because you knew, like the equation for us seemed to be, if we want to sell work and kind of fund it that way, you know, there was only 2 spaces in Chicago that were very viable at the time that were doing that, in our opinion. It was Rona Hoffman and Donald Young. If you're going to do it that way, that's the model, but you don't get there overnight. Like, but what do they do right that nobody else is doing? And they, you know, they had a really strong program of like mixing work that's a little edgier and installation based with other things, and they got curatorial attention, they got press attention. Like, we were going after all those things to try and build a program without like consciously thinking we have to be art dealers. And then before you know it, 6 years later,
But you
we're in
were
a position,
looking to some commercial models.
absolutely, because
for
we didn't feel
inspiration.
like we could, we didn't understand enough on how to apply for grant funding or like, and we didn't want coming off of SUGS, we didn't want the constraints of other people telling us what we should be showing, having a board or having a committee. It was just like, we wanted to be in charge of the decisions we were making.
Right.
Completely. Yeah.
What about you? Do you lean more towards a commercial model, or do you lean more towards like a nonprofit model in the future?
No, definitely everything is for sale.
Right.
Or has always been. I never like incorporated Sulk in any way. It was always just guerrilla and like taking money from my jobs outside of the gallery and putting it back into the gallery. There were like times where I would need an artist to like pay to ship the work to me on the promise that I would ship it back and pay them back for shipping.
Sure.
Or hopefully it would sell and then we wouldn't have to ship it anywhere. So a lot of things like that. And then I kind of like got priced out. Honestly, the rent just went up, so that was like an issue. And then with this new space, I just opened a space in October. It's a bookstore and gallery concept, and seeing these books fly off the shelf, they are way less money than a piece of art is, but it's really nice to have like sales happening and energy in the space like that. And I think it wasn't intentional, and maybe it won't like end up weighing out, but it is easier to sell books, and so it's nice that the gallery and the bookstore touch each other, and like there's movement in the bookstore. But yeah, we are just making our rent basically,
Right.
and then hopefully making money to buy books or consign books from other vendors.
I feel like your practice is very research focused. Am I correct in saying that?
Like
in terms of,
unsellable?
yeah.
or-
No. I just feel like you're very interested in history and research.
Yeah, which is another reason I'm super stoked on the bookstore, and really like Sulk Chicago, and then the gallery side of the bookstore is something I like to do, like making shows with friends and making shows with young artists. But I went to school for art history, so I've always kind of had like one foot out and one foot into art history, and like more what I studied than making contemporary art shows. So I think having the bookstore next to the gallery space kind of like opens it up naturally. So there's this natural conversation that's happening now between these like rare books that span like all of the 20th century into the 21st century, and then the art that I like, that I want to show now. So I kind of have the best of both worlds in that way that I was missing at my apartment. And also another thing is having the bookstore kind of makes it like not a white cube. We left a lot of the like deterioration of the building as much as we could. We had to like paint some stuff in the gallery white, but we tried to leave a lot of the original building so that it does feel maybe more like researchy or nerdy and not so sterile. We want people to like hang out and obviously maybe buy some books, read some books, but also to bring us their zines and to really like make kind of like a very small like space for like ideas to exchange, and to like encourage publishing again.
Taylor, do you take, I'm sorry, can I ask?
No, please, yeah.
Do you take book donations or catalog
We
donations?
of course would take any donations, and then when we were planning, we would hope that we would be in a place where we could buy outright or consign, but definitely donations.
Yeah, I mean, I looked through your catalog online, and it's really complimentary to the programming. I mean, it's stuff that would be hard to find. It's super interesting. Like, it's a nice curated selection of things. It's a smart idea.
Thank
Because
you.
being able to hang out in a show at some point, you just kind of want to take a break, maybe do that, go through some publications,
Yeah.
and then go back in. It's a really, I think it's an interesting way to go about the whole thing.
Yeah, we have warm light in the bookstore and daylight in the other.
Oh, okay.
So
Nice.
kind of doing these things on purpose.
Yeah, cool.
So you just had your first opening, right? Which was a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, it was on October 6th, so
October 6th.
only a few weeks ago.
How did you feel about that? It was during, I forget what they're calling it.
Oh yeah,
but-
the Chicago exhibition weekend. It was that Sunday, and so my co-founder / director Mark LeBlanc. We're in this space where Grunts Rare Books is. It's the Midland building, which is where Goodweather is, Haynes Riley's space, and then Apparatus Projects used to be in that building too. One of the directors of Apparatus, Julian, and Megan Foy, they opened a gallery space in the building the same day, and then there was like a program on the first floor. So there was a lot of nice like energy in the building, and people were there. So it was super sweet. It was so fun to just watch people flip through the books, honestly. People seem super hungry for that. So
That's
it's
great.
cool to see. And we made some sales, and yeah, it was a beautiful day. It's a really cool building. If you haven't been to Haynes' space or my space yet, you should definitely come. We like have a nice, it's at 15th and Western, so we have this very like nice view of the city from the southwest side, and there's nothing that obstructs the view. It's just like train yards, and then the building that we're in used to be like a freight cargo center, so, and it still is like mainly used for storage and loading docks, but there's train tracks that run through the bottom of the building. It's just a really cool, like industrial kind of deteriorated space that you could explore for a long time without even going to see any of the exhibitions.
Yeah, it's a
So.
really cool space. I wanted to ask you about how did you choose some of the artists that you first worked with? Were they just peers? How was the relationship with you and Amavong in terms of curating and selecting who you wanted to work
Yeah.
with?
So Amavong and I shared a studio in that State Street building, and then we would, after deciding we would continue to do the gallery project, we found a studio space on the north side and a storefront.
Was that in Uptown?
It was in Uptown,
I remember that.
down the street from the Riv on Leland and Racine. And it was street level storefront. And so we had our studio spaces in the back of that, and then in the front of it, we would operate the gallery. We would be talking all the time about like things, ideas that we were interested in together, and, you know, ideas about collaboration, ideas about, a lot of it came from conversation, ideas about gentrification, jokes like, you know, recycling, like, you know, just, you know, finding like thrift, industry, self-reliance, these sort of things were kind of coming up, and there were artists that we would find so we'd come up with a topic for a show. Like, we did this show in the North Side space called Constructing the Oasis, Keep Off the Grass. And it was sort of like addressing, like, you know, the idea was coming out of this sort of observation that Daley was like making all these amazing changes to the city, but it was coming at a cost. There's like,
Sure.
you know, the whole city felt like it was starting to gentrify in the late 90s, early, you know, big time. And so we would kind of treat the topic as a conversation and pick the artists like that would all contribute to that conversation differently. And some of it would be from like peers from SAIC whose work we remember, and like, hey, what are you making now? Let's, would you like to be part of this? Do something for it. And some of it would be referrals from them, or just going out to other shows and seeing things. And then so we put the show together that way. And then so each show kind of came about from Amavong and I agreeing on a topic, and then bringing a bunch of artists to the table that we would want to include and invite. And those shows were up for 2 to 3 months at a time. So, we would just make sure it's something we could live with, for that period and want to support, because we were still funding it. It's like it needed to be kind of, we both had to believe in it. And then we were doing the exhibits as sort of installation environments. So for that show, we sodded the entire gallery and let it just rot out for 3 months. And so all the work was installed in this sort of sodded room, which was amazing, for the opening, like walking in barefooted in this space and the smells and everything, and how the work sort of interacted with that. But it was also, like acknowledging that it's also pretty overpowering to the installation. That was one of the things over time we would kind of get away from, is just letting the artists kind of challenging them to use the space with their ideas that we were excited about, but having them do it in a site-specific way, like even if they hadn't done that before. I think the program evolved in like, you could say like 3 phases. In the beginning, it was these group shows based on these things that would be up for a period of time to build an audience, and then the second was these exhibit series, which sort of gave artists the opportunity to use the whole space themselves, but be part of a group show that happened in like 3 segments with pairs of artists, getting some buy-in, hopefully, from the audience to come back for 2 more shows. And then at the end, it would be picking artists from this, 3-4 years of programming to, all right, we believe in what you're doing. Here's the space, do your thing, so that.
Did you ever consider representation?
We did.
Artists?
That's what we did when we started doing at the end the last 2 years. Because we got really upset with like introducing artists, and then them getting snatched up by like galleries that could sell their work. So, and again, this sort of came out of the sort of funding model. It's like we're busting our ass to keep this thing open, and other people are like selling the work, that was just shown. And that would fund probably, that whole show, and then another show. So it was a desire to kind of engage with that. But ultimately, that sort of sales aspect of doing it didn't sit well, like personality-wise with me.
I have one quick question.
What?
And I don't know, I'm just curious. Did you have a moment where you had that first big sale? And I'll put that question to you too. I don't know if you had a moment like that. I know I've had those experiences, so
I can't remember the first thing I sold, but there was one show where it just kept selling, and I was super like obviously so excited for the artist and excited to tell them. But I like was so scared on each piece. I was scared to tell them until I had the money in my bank account, because I just couldn't believe that it was actually happening, like for me and for this artist too. And I remember the next show and maybe the next show after that, nothing sold, and it kind of like came back to earth.
Right.
But it was such a good feeling to be able to like pay out this artist just over and over the whole run of this show.
Yeah.
It wasn't the first sale, but the most memorable kind of light bulb moment was, right before we closed, actually. It was like one of the last shows. In late 2001, 3 artists that we had introduced to Chicago were selected for the Whitney Biennial, and for the 2002 Biennial. And one of those artists was our February show. His name was Connor McGrady. And as soon as the biennial went up, like nobody was interested in this work. He's from Northern Ireland. It was about the conflict, it was about power and racism and like toxic masculinity and all these like really difficult kind of things. And people just started calling. They're like, what do you have available? Send us, we started using JPEGs at that time for transitioning from slides, so that was faster. And we were selling the whole show in the inventory as soon as the biennial went up. I'm like, oh, like this is how this works, like that was kind of, we'd made more money in that show than we'd made for the entire 5 years prior, like it was insane. But we still didn't want to stay open. We're like, no, this is not for us. So,
yeah. What was the decision to stop running the space? And real quick before you answer, I just want to say, when I opened my space, I went around and asked a lot of people for advice, and you were one of them. And your key advice was, have an end date.
I stand by that advice.
Yeah, I mean,
I think, especially for an artist-run space, I think like, and that was my big takeaway from doing it, is that had we just said at the beginning, like, hey, we're going to do this for 5 years. It's a 5-year project. And at the end of it, it gives you it gives a bookend to it where you can move on to something else and you can treat it like a project. Getting to the point where we were at the end of like being burnt out, being broke, I was tired of hearing myself talk like all the time at every event about the artists and the program and what's coming up and this and that, and like feeling like I have to sell this thing all the time.
You develop a pitch.
Yeah, you get
it just happens, right?
It does. I'm just
I
like,
don't know if that's true for you.
and I hadn't seen, this personal stuff, but like I hadn't seen all my grandparents died within like a year, and I didn't hadn't seen them in like 5 years. I've been doing this thing, and my relationship at the time came apart, and my I was making all my money was going into this thing. I'm just like, this is not. I want to do something different. I want to take a break. I just want to. And the real capper, like for me, was people who I considered peers, and we had done other group shows and things together, and now we were working with. Some of them were like, it was the attitude of like, why aren't you working hard enough for me? What have you done for me lately? And I'm like, okay, this is not cool. This is not okay. They're like, you're my dealer. What are you doing? And I said, yeah, this wasn't really so. It was at that point I just needed to take a pause and take a breath. And had we decided that it would just be this bookended thing, it would have been much easier to kind of keep it positive. I think we were very angsty at the end and kind of like, we were ornery to begin with, but we were very ornery at the end.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Were you guys always by appointment?
No, so we did the by appointment in the first space in State, and then when we moved to Uptown, one of the things we did is we kept Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday hours, and so Amalong and I would trade those. I'd do one evening, it was Tuesday, like after work, so 6 to 9, which was kind of cool because people could come, and we got people coming out for those. They would come, so Tuesday 6 to 9, Thursday 6 to 9, Saturday I think it was 1 to 5, and Sunday 1 to 5 or something like that. So each of us would take a weekend day, and each of us would take a weekday night. And then when we moved to the West Loop, like when we were really going to go for it with, having a represented program and be in the gallery district at that time, we hired a gallery attendant. Wow. And we had hours Tuesday to Saturday just like everyone else.
For like 3 years?
Yeah, for 2. I think we were in the West Loop for just over 2 years.
What years were those?
We moved to the West Loop in late '99, I think, and we wrapped it up in February 2002.
Wow.
So yeah.
And who else was out there at that time?
So there was a thing kind of happening right before that where one of the big collectors in town, Louis Manilow, was going around to the younger spaces like us and Bodybuilder and Sportsman, Chicago Project Room. He wanted to put together this super space down in the Loop, the South Loop, where he would own the building and he would invite the galleries that he thought were the up-and-comers that to be like an incubator for this next wave, so it didn't fall apart after a few years like the Uncomfortable Spaces would. And because he also would buy from those spaces, like there was a recognition amongst, I think, the collector group in Chicago that the interesting work was coming out of these artist-run spaces, and then there was only a couple places to go after that if these spaces didn't make it. So that, he took so long to kind of, I don't think Dan Hoog was on board with Chicago Project Room, or if he was, it was only for a minute, because he would go out to LA and take his gallery to Chinatown in LA. And they were like far ahead of everyone else, like in terms of understanding. But, you know, he also had a lot more experience family-wise and their group to kind of know that the lay of the land. I mean, but he was the most bold in terms of saying, fuck all y'all, we're going to do our own thing.
Yeah.
Like, we're not worried about you.
Right.
Like, so they moved to LA. The thing came apart with Lou. So we got the West Loop was starting with Peter Miller bought a building.
Right.
And then Rona moved into it, and Peter Miller and these other galleries. That was that across the street. And then Kavi Gupta and Tom McCormick
So was
bought
Rona
a
there
building.
when you were there?
Yeah.
She was already
She moved in
there?
after us. It was actually
After.
us and Bodybuilder and Sportsman moved into the 119 building. And then this, I think, Green Lantern Press moved in there too. And then there was this, we rented part of our space, we divvied it up and made a separate gallery and rented part of our space to Flat File. We rented our space from Vedanta Gallery that became Kavi Gupta Gallery.
Right.
Those guys actually came up and talked us into moving into the West Loop because he wanted to rival what Lou Manilow was doing. And the West Loop became the district for a while.
Yeah.
You know, because Donald was already over there. He was around the corner, and everybody wanted to be close to Donald. You know, he was the
Right.
leader. I mean, really.
Right.
You know, so. And it was a whole generational difference, but in terms of the kind of work we look to as established, not that we want to show that or do that, but like, if you're going to look at blue chip work, that was where you're going to look at, you know, where everybody was hoping to kind of, not the gallerist, but the artist, certainly, you know, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a wild cycle to watch the West Loop.
It's an ecology, though, I think.
Absolutely.
This constantly kind of happens, and 30 years later we can see that, but at the time we're like, maybe this will be the next thing, you know?
It's interesting to think about your vantage of, because I think, I personally feel like the cycle feels like it's revved down, but I don't know if that's true because I'm just getting older.
Like the West,
You know,
the West
to be
Loop?
realistic, like I just might not know.
The West Loop.
Just the ecology of the art world in Chicago in terms of, I mean, because you're talking about
yeah.
lots of relationships between collectors and artists and dealers, and it seems pretty dynamic. And I'm just wondering if you're experiencing that same dynamism.
I think, like Ian said, like the more interesting stuff is happening in smaller spaces, like not the blue chip galleries. But maybe that's just because there's more opportunity for like emerging artists to show their work. And then when you do go try to find places to see good art outside of the alternative spaces, there are like probably just a few, you know, like younger blue chip spaces that you would look to. I would say that's kind of still the vibe. I would say that the kind of more like established galleries that I go to aren't in the West Loop. But I think that the dealers that I really like and respect do have relationships with young artists, and there is this exchange. Like, I work with a lot of young artists, obviously, like in my gallery, but I also work in a bar, and I
Right.
know a ton of young artists in their 20s and 30s that, you know, don't make that many shows, and they definitely don't have representation, but these dealers are interested in their work and they're watching them maybe, and I feel like everyone is friends to a certain degree, at least like the artist dealer circle that I found myself in. I think there could probably be like more of an exchange of ideas, but I don't know what it would look like.
Interesting.
I think, hand me that straight, that
Yeah.
top one for a second.
Yeah, like we don't have a stray show. We don't
That
have,
was like a key move because like we've been living with art fairs for so long now, like you forget, like the whole art fair thing was starting in the late 90s. Like Art Chicago was kind of the for so long up to that point was like the only thing in the
I was
US.
listening to something Kenny Schachter had a thing on Instagram, and he was talking about he came up in the 80s and was talking the only real fair in the U.S. was in Chicago.
Yep.
And it for sure, when I was a student in the mid 90s, that was the dominant.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. It was international.
Exactly.
And it really, I don't know all the different fairs, but I feel like there was Basel and
In Basel, Switzerland.
And Chicago,
Yeah.
and there's a third one, I can't remember.
Cologne.
And
Yeah.
Cologne.
Yep.
And that was kind of like the art fair network. It was very small.
And so, and the sort of, the cool thing about Expo Chicago, Tom Blackman's fair, being in Chicago, is it gave all of us in Chicago an opportunity. Everything was coming to us to see. Like, even if you like fairs or not, what it does do, it's a trade show, right? So like everybody, like premier galleries from around the world will come to Chicago with their programs, and you can go see work firsthand that you'd have to do a lot of traveling to see, or just look at the program for the MCA and Gallery 400, whatever they were going to show, Arts Club. Like, that's the only other time, if you were local, you were probably going to see that work, Art Institute. But Expo Chicago brings it all there at the moment. So like there was something, there always was a strange relationship between, because none of the small spaces, like, we didn't love the art fair, but we knew that like we wanted our work and our programs out in the world beyond Chicago. We just didn't want it to be local. And there was a recognition, I think, amongst Tom's people, like Heather Hubbs was with Tom.
Who now runs
and
Nada.
this was her project, Stray.
Yeah,
And
I
she's
remember.
like, there's all these spaces that can't afford to be in this fair, like, because you're not gonna, if you give them, a small booth price, you're gonna have to give everybody a small, like, I'm sure there's whatever politics they had, within, but she's like, I'll find a space and I'll do this sort of side fair, and I'll handpick all of these spaces to be in it that we should pay attention to. And so like we kind of, if anything, at that moment for that sort of generation of spaces, we were the Stray spaces. Like, I don't know if that was, like, that's kind of, like, the Stray off, like, this was Kay Rosen's design. They asked Kay Rosen to design this thing, and they picked these galleries, and it was a mix, and it was a pretty good rep of what was happening. I mean, there was Suitable, awesome space, like in a garage. Suburban, obviously, just sort of, they already came into Chicago with a rep, Michelle Grabner did, so like, there was great things happening there. Standard, these guys were doing cool things. 7-3 Split, Tim Fleming's place. It was awesome. We're on here, Joymore, MN, Dogmatic. I mean, Michael Thomas's space is super important.
Epic.
During that whole period. Bodybuilder and Sportsman can. So I think this was a good profile of the moment. Didn't include everybody, but it had a lot. And that gave us some, like, a foothold in making relationships, like, with some of these folks from out of town.
Yeah.
And, I think there was, and there became a tension, a resentment, I think, amongst the more established, like River North. There's a ton of Chicago galleries that were very regional, that didn't understand what was happening with this, and we all were like, we don't want to be associated. We actually got invited to be part of the Chicago Art Dealers Association.
Oh, yeah.
They sent us a letter that's like, we'd like you to join the Chicago Art Dealers Association. And then, so I sat down with, and we had nice relationships with, like, Roy Boyd, like, people wanted to sort of mentor us into this thing. Rona was offering to take artists from our program to fairs and start working on that. It was such an, like, repulsive to us to be part of CADA, Chicago Art Dealers Association. We sat down and said, no way. I mean, like, everything we're doing is in our heart and soul up against, different from what we see you guys doing. And, this is coming from 22. We were, 22 to 27 years old I was when we did this. So we're punks, we're just like, I don't regret it, but I definitely think that it was, like, know who you're asking for things, like
Sure.
these, it felt like a punk rock moment, but.
I grew up on a lot of those spaces that you just, in the Stray Show.
Yeah.
I actually did have a booth in the Stray Show, oddly
cool.
enough. And that was kind of those, like, I think going to the Pilsen spaces in the early 2000s is what compelled me to open a space.
That would be like Dogmatic. And,
Dogmatic,
Yep.
1R, which
Yep.
Mark was a part of, who I work with now. I'm kind of wondering if you have, like, so I think the spaces for me that were kind of like myth or lore was Randolph Street Gallery, Name, Robin Lockett. Like, those were things I had heard about, but was too young and had kind of missed that.
Yep, Feigen.
I'm Feigen. Oh my God. I'm kind of wondering if you had that experience in the city. Is there a generation or spaces that have a kind of lore for you, or not?
I mean, I've heard about all your projects,
Right, okay.
obviously, and then I think like NFA, and then like Dan's project, and I've heard a lot about Name, but these things like escape me. And then when I'm going through and doing someone like Mindy Rose Schwartz or Peter Fagundo's CV, I've like never heard of any of these spaces, and it just opens up the legacy so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, those are the ones that come to mind for sure.
So, another question I have is just kind of an in general question. Like, maybe I'll start with you. Like, where do you see Chicago in a larger ecosystem? What keeps you here? Do you think you'll stay here? And then for you, I'll ask, like, what was your experience of Chicago? Like, because now you're in LA. Trader. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, are you
I'm just
glad you
kidding.
I
left?
feel very nostalgic when I'm here.
Yeah, I mean,
As long as I don't come in February.
so yes. So right, February. So from both of you, what is your relationship to the city, and how do you see it? What's good about it? What sucks about it, other than the cold?
Are you from here, Ian?
I'm from Detroit.
Okay,
Yeah, so I'm a Midwestern.
close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from Texas.
Oh, cool.
So I have no ties to Chicago, or none that existed
What
before
made
I
you come
moved
up
here.
here?
Yeah, I moved up here for college, and then I've stayed, and I like it, and having a relationship with it has felt important, so that's why I've stayed, and probably will stay for a little bit. I want to know if you're happy you went to LA.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted a change. So I love Chicago. I think Chicago is one of the best cities in the world. It was the best place to be an artist and to do something like this. Like, I don't think you can do this in many places at the scale or speed or any of it. Like, you can be an artist in Chicago, a working artist, and live here. Like, really live here. I think that I appreciate that more not being in Chicago and looking at what Chicago has to offer than actually being in Chicago and recognizing that. And what I mean by that is other cities are super expensive. They're definitely spread out more. LA is an example. Strong art scene, but everything's just like tweaked up. Like, it's more expensive. Things are farther. Practices are bigger and more production heavy. And that's the thing that gets supported and kind of perpetuated. It's this bigness, that I think also New York can be too, but there's something different about New York. You can have both, but I think looking at Chicago from LA, I definitely remember there's this Midwestern kind of chip that can happen.
Yeah.
Right? And that isn't helpful.
I agree.
It's helpful in like getting things done and working hard, but it's not helpful in the levity that like makes for a longer, this is just my opinion, but it makes for a longer, more positive and exciting relationship with making and with other people. Like, if you get caught up in that sort of like, oh, woe is me, collectors, they buy from everybody else, it's just not, it's not good. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like, I used to attribute it to just the art school angst. Like, I think that kind of thing flows through SAIC and probably other institutions. It's like, the students versus the administration, or department versus department, or it's this us versus them, like somebody's making it harder for me to do what I'm doing, instead of looking at, look at all the shit that I can do with this, you know, like, and I can work with. Like, it's just a different, like, mental twist that maybe all that sunshine's giving me. I don't know.
Right.
You know? Yeah. I mean, I think after living in the Midwest for so many years, I wanted, and also doing what I did in Chicago as an arts worker, as an educator, as like a business owner, as gallerist, like as a maker. I loved Chicago, and I saw my future before me. I saw the next 20 years of what it would look like, and I'm like, I want to be surprised. And maybe that wouldn't have been what it was, what I thought, but I just wanted to change things so radically that I had to figure it out. And, you know, the other thing that happened is I started a family in LA. And like, for me, like waiting so long to start a family, I really wanted to focus on that, like, and give that time. Because I also, like, and maybe it's a ridiculous idea, I think, to not be able to, like, as an artist, to think, I can't get married, I can't have kids, I can't have a relationship, whatever it is, you know, that's going to give me these, like, take away from this ambition or whatever. I was thinking that for a while. I was thinking that I needed to make these sacrifices in order to do this stuff. Just me, you know, and I think that I'm glad I didn't forego those things for myself, and now I feel like I have to focus on them. So,
do you get out much in LA to like younger spaces? And is there a DIY scene in LA?
You know what's funny about that is like, there was a cool space sort of modeled after the Suburban in Highland Park called Adjunct Positions by an SAIC alum, David Prince.
Cool.
You know, he went out there and he started this cool space and was inviting people to do work in a garage he finished out for shows. That went on for a little while and then stopped. The programming's periodic. I watched a space grow very similar to ours and go fully into the commercial kind of aspect, the Pit and the Pit 2. Those guys started only 7 years ago. They got 2 spaces, I think 3 spaces now. And it's still like it's an artist-run space. I don't, you know, I know those folks, our kids have gone to school together for years. Like, it's pretty interesting to see how fast that thing grew.
I watched Night Gallery grow up, and it was, I mean, it felt like I'm pretty sure they understood it as a DIY artist-run space. It was in a strip mall, and it was called Night Gallery because they painted all the walls black, and they were only open, their open hours were at night, and it was pretty wild. And then to watch it turn into like a legitimate
now they have a campus.
They moved into like an airplane hangar in like that section with.
And I think it's a little longer than 6 years, but it's still a pretty narrow time frame.
Like
but admittedly, I don't get to all the little spaces or dig them out and find them. I'd love to do more of that, but
you were just out there. You had just curated a show.
Yeah, I just made a show at this space called Temple Projects, which is kind of like a project space, but they are super fluid. Like, I don't know if they'll keep making shows for much longer. But I know there's, like, my friend Grant Tyler ran Imperial Gallery in his apartment for a second, which he's taken a break from that. But I know of a more recent kind of success story, like this Quarters Gallery. They were in Los Feliz, and they were like someone's laundry room. It was just like a laundry room gallery, so they called it Quarters. And now they have a storefront, and they're doing pretty well, I think.
How long were you out there?
I was out there for like a week. Yeah.
And did you get around out to? Did you have time, or were you just kind of focusing on the show?
I went to one gallery.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then I went to a few studios, and I saw the Richer retrospective and did see some art, but no, I only got around to one other gallery.
What are some of our takeaways?
I think Chicago has a rich history of this kind of practice that I think we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, that the MCA started sort of cataloging it with that Lynn Warren show, Alternative Spaces, A History, that went up to, it was like I don't want to say the dates, it was like 1950 to 1985, and then...
Which we just
95.
got.
95?
95.
And then Hyde Park Arts Center did Artist Run Chicago twice and did catalogs for that. I really think that either those organizations or someone else needs to make sure that we capture the history of these artist-run spaces. You know, I would never have, and this overlapped with me, I would never have heard of Art Ledge if it wasn't inside that catalog. I would never, you know, it was like how many shows?
You know, it's interesting. His name is Gareth?
Gareth, yeah.
He's a part of Apparatus? Is that
Gareth
right?
was one half of Apparatus, Gareth K. And he has like a Substack criticism practice called Chicago Spleen, but he's also an independent curator and writer, and he is staging a like months-long show through the rest of the year at David Salkin's studio. That's like chronicling artist-run spaces. I know he had Rowley.
I feel like he's trying to pick up like indirect reference to that catalog, like 95 to 2025.
Oh, cool.
I'm interested to see what that grows into. But yeah, he did a talk that I went to with Raleigh Knirk, and it was interesting because I felt like Raleigh Knirk was kind of like his lore moment in Chicago history.
And so there was a wave, like I remember right after we finished with Rowley Knirk and Bucket Rider and 1R, and like there was a pack at Western exhibitions, like some of them are still around, some of them are not. Like there's a pack that came right after that too. Yeah. You know, I just feel like capturing the history is going to be inspiring and can continue this practice of artist-run spaces. Just the knowledge is helpful, like knowing what the models look like. I feel like had I known the models a bit better, you know, it could have made some decisions that might have made the project last longer in a way that, because the only thing I regret about it ending was ending a venue for artists to, there's just never enough. You know, there's way more artists than venues, you know, so.
I think my takeaway is I love that you brought all this stuff, and I'm excited to look through it. For Chicago as a city that I love and value, I think it's important that we document our own histories. So not only starting these projects, but documenting them and then organizing them into some kind of final form that's actually accessible to younger generations to learn and grow from.
Hey, maybe you're that guy.
Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe it's time for another MCA show.
Maybe Gareth is that guy. I have hope for him.
Yeah, we actually just got that catalog for the bookstore, the alt spaces at the MCA.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I got a copy.
I can give
we'll talk. There's a lot of things that I'd love
I mean,
to
that
share.
was like, I know you want to wrap up, but maybe it's a good final note. That was kind of like Mark and I's, one of our motivations for starting the bookstore. We got this donation from Jason Pickelman and Leslie of all these old catalogs, these shows that happened in the 80s and 90s at the Renaissance Society and the Arts Club. And they're like 15-page catalogs, but they were limited print, and a lot of people haven't seen them. And we have a lot of like suburban anniversary catalogs and things like this. So I think we wanted, or I know that we did want that to be kind of educational for young, maybe students who are still at SAC to come through the bookstore and look at all like the spaces and the amazing exhibitions that have been staged in Chicago, and maybe they won't feel this chip and they won't want to leave. And so.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you both so much.
Thank you guys
for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So thank you all for joining us out there on the internet and also in-house here. This was our final in-person session of the year. So look forward to looking at some of these recordings and other materials. We'll be having some of that posted on our How to Make a Scene page on coprosperity.org. and also through our Midway Atlas down the road. So looking in 2025, you'll see we're putting together a publication with some of these transcripts and et cetera, edited lightly. To be published next year at some point. But, thank you all for participating, all the other panelists and moderators. It's been a really wonderful run. And so thanks again to the panelists today. And we'll see you on our last show, which will be Nicole Marroquin and other panelists, which will air on Thursday. And we'll cap the season with that. So thank you.